The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the most impressive room in the known galaxy. It sat at the heart of Nexus Prime, a massive space station that floated at the crossroads of a dozen major trade routes. The chamber itself was built to make anyone standing at its center feel small. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. The walls were covered in gold and precious stones from 100 different worlds. 12 towering seats arranged in a circle held the representatives of the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy. Today, a single human stood in the center of that circle. John Morrison was 53 years old. He had gray hair cut short and a face that showed the lines of a man who had seen too much and worried about most of it. He wore a simple gray suit, the standard uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. His hands were bound in front of him with energy cuffs that glowed a soft blue. He stood straight and calm, as if he were attending a boring meeting rather than his own trial. High Arbiter Vorath looked down at the human from his elevated seat. Vorath was Thesari, a species of tall reptilian beings with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like yellow flames. The Thesari had controlled the Galactic Council for 3 centuries. They were not the strongest species or the smartest, but they were the most ruthless. They had learned long ago that the key to power was not winning wars, but preventing anyone else from becoming strong enough to challenge them. John Morrison of Earth, Vorath said, his voice echoing through the chamber. You stand accused of espionage against the Galactic Council. You stand accused of destabilizing sovereign worlds along the border regions. You stand accused of inciting rebellion among protected species. How do you answer these charges? Morrison looked up at Vorath. His expression did not change. The charges are false. You know they are false. Everyone in this chamber knows they are false. A ripple of whispers moved through the observer galleries that lined the upper walls of the chamber. Thousands of beings from dozens of species had come to watch this trial. Humans were still new to the galactic stage, having only discovered faster-than-light travel a little over a century ago. They were curious, these humans. They asked too many questions. They made friends too easily. They had a troubling habit of treating all species as equals, even the ones the Council had designated as lesser beings. John Morrison had been the worst of them. In 15 years as a diplomat, he had brokered trade deals that bypassed Council-controlled markets. He had helped struggling colonies become self-sufficient. He had exposed 3 separate corruption scandals involving Council officials. He had, without ever breaking a single law, become one of the most dangerous humans alive. The Council had decided he needed to be removed. The evidence has been presented, Vorath said. The tribunal has reviewed your case. We find you guilty on all charges. Morrison nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing else. And the sentence? Vorath allowed himself a small smile. His species did not show emotion easily, but this moment was worth savoring. The humans had been growing too confident lately. They needed to be reminded of their place in the galactic order. Death, Vorath said, to be carried out in 3 days' time, here on Nexus Prime, as a public demonstration of Council justice. The observer galleries erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others shouted in protest. The humans in the crowd, a small group of diplomats and journalists, sat in stunned silence. Earth's government had sent formal protests. They had demanded a fair trial. They had been ignored. Morrison waited for the noise to die down. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. I would advise you to reconsider. Vorath leaned forward in his seat. Is that a threat, human? No, Morrison said. It is advice. I have spent 15 years studying the Council. I have learned how it works. I have seen what it does to species that cannot defend themselves. I have watched you crush dreams and destroy hope across 1,000 worlds. And in all that time, I have been very careful to remember everything. You are a diplomat, Vorath said. Your government has already filed their protest. It was noted and dismissed. What more can they do? Humanity is young. You have a handful of colony worlds and a small defense fleet. You are not even a full member of the Council. You are nothing. Morrison smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but something about it made Vorath uncomfortable. We are human, Morrison said. We have never been nothing. Vorath waved his hand dismissively. Take him to the detention level, increase security, I want no mistakes before the execution." Guards moved forward to escort Morrison away. They were Kreth, a species of large insectoid beings who served as the Council's enforcers. Their armor was thick, and their weapons were always ready. Morrison did not resist as they took hold of his arms and led him toward the chamber's exit. As he walked, Morrison moved his bound hand slightly. The movement was small enough that the guards did not notice. His fingers touched a thin band around his wrist, hidden beneath the sleeve of his suit. It was not a weapon. It was not an escape device. It was simply a transmitter, designed to send a single coded signal across a very long distance. He pressed it. Somewhere in deep space, in a system that appeared on no official maps, a light began to blink on the bridge of a ship. The ship was called the Silent Promise, and it was the first of its kind. Its hull was covered in materials that absorbed sensor signals. Its engines produced almost no detectable emissions. It could drift through the heart of an enemy fleet without being noticed. Captain David Webb looked at the blinking light. He was a thin man with tired eyes and steady hands. He had served in Earth's Navy for 20 years before being recruited for this assignment. He had trained for 3 more years for a mission he hoped would never come. The light meant that hope was over. "Signal confirmed," his communications officer said quietly. "Protocol Prometheus is now active." Webb took a deep breath. He had known John Morrison for 10 years. They had served together during the border conflicts. Morrison had saved his life once, during an ambush that should have killed them both. Now Morrison was going to die, and Webb was going to do everything in his power to prevent it. "Send word to the Forge," Webb said. "Wake everyone up. We have 3 days." On Nexus Prime, John Morrison was led through gleaming corridors toward the detention level. The guards were silent and efficient. Other beings moved out of their way, watching the condemned human with curiosity or satisfaction or pity. Morrison paid them no attention. He was thinking about the years of preparation that had led to this moment. He was thinking about the files hidden in secure servers across the galaxy. He was thinking about the allies he had quietly gathered, the favors he had earned, the secrets he had collected. The Council thought they were executing a troublesome diplomat. They did not understand that they were activating a trap that had been 15 years in the making. Morrison was placed in a cell with walls of solid energy. The guards posted themselves outside. The door sealed shut with a sound like thunder. He sat down on the simple bed and closed his eyes. In 3 days, he would either be free or dead. Either way, the galaxy was about to change. On Earth, news of the death sentence spread within hours. People gathered in public squares to watch the broadcasts. Politicians made angry speeches. Protesters marched outside the offices of the Galactic Council's Earth delegation. But in a secure room deep beneath the government complex, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a wall of screens showing data streams from across the galaxy. She was 60 years old, with white hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She had fought in 3 wars and won them all. Now she faced a challenge that could not be solved with weapons alone. "Protocol Prometheus is active," she said to the small group assembled before her. "Morrison has been sentenced to death. We have 72 hours. "Can we get him out?" asked Director Hayes, the head of Earth's intelligence service. "Not through force," Chen said. "Nexus Prime has the heaviest defenses in the galaxy. A direct assault would fail and give the Council an excuse to declare war on Earth." "Then what do we do?" Chen turned to face the screens. They showed maps of Council space, communication networks, financial systems, military deployments, 15 years of intelligence gathering, all organized and ready. "We do exactly what Morrison planned," she said. "We show the Council that there are worse things than war. We show them what happens when you attack someone who knows all your secrets." She pressed a command on her console. Across the galaxy, hidden systems began to wake up. Programs that had been dormant for years started running. Messages were sent to contacts who had been waiting for this signal. The Galactic Council had ordered John Morrison's death. They thought they were eliminating a threat. They had no idea what they had just started. The Forge was humanity's greatest secret. It existed in a system with no name, orbiting a dim red star that produced barely enough light to see by. The system had been discovered by accident 30 years ago, and the discovery had been immediately classified at the highest level. No record of it existed in any database the Council could access. From the outside, the forge looked like an asteroid. Its surface was rough and cratered, covered in the same gray rock found on a billion other space rocks throughout the galaxy. But beneath that surface was a facility that had taken 2 decades to build. It was not a weapons factory. It was not a shipyard. It was something far more valuable. It was a school. Captain David Webb docked the Silent Promise in one of the forge's hidden bays. As he walked through the corridors toward the command center, he passed dozens of men and women in simple gray uniforms. They moved with quiet purpose, checking equipment, reviewing data, preparing for operations they had trained years to perform. These were the Shadows. They were humanity's answer to the Council's overwhelming military advantage. Earth could not match the Council's fleets. They could not build bigger ships or deadlier weapons, so they had built something else instead. They had built the best intelligence and cyber warfare force in the galaxy. Commander Lisa Park met Webb at the entrance to the command center. She was a small woman with short black hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. She had designed half the programs that would be used in the coming operation. "Protocol Prometheus," she said. "I hoped we would never have to use it." Morrison hoped the same thing, Webb said, but he always believed in being prepared. They entered the command center together. It was a large circular room filled with screens and consoles. A holographic display in the center showed a map of Council space, with thousands of points of light representing ships, stations, and planets. "Show me the targets," Webb said. Park touched a control, and the display changed. Hundreds of the points turned red. "Communication relays," she said. "Financial servers, military command networks, government databases. We have access points in all of them." Morrison spent 15 years building this network. Every time he visited a council world, every time he attended a diplomatic function, he was planting seeds. "And now we harvest them." "Carefully," Park said. "The plan is not to destroy. The plan is to expose." Morrison was very specific about that. He said that the Council's greatest weakness is not their military or their economy. It is their lies. They have spent centuries telling the galaxy that they are wise and just and necessary. We are going to show everyone the truth. Webb studied the display. He thought about Morrison sitting in a cell on Nexus Prime, waiting to die. He thought about the 15 years of work that had led to this moment. Morrison had always been patient. He had always believed that the right information, delivered at the right time, could change everything. "What do we release first?" Webb asked. Park smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "The trial records, the real ones. The ones that show how the Council fabricated every piece of evidence against Morrison. The ones that show the bribes paid to witnesses. The ones that show Vorath himself ordering the operation. That will embarrass them. That is just the beginning." On Nexus Prime, High Arbiter Vorath was enjoying a celebratory dinner when the first reports reached him. His private dining room overlooked the station's central garden, a vast space filled with plants from 100 worlds. He was eating a rare delicacy from his homeworld when his assistant entered with a worried expression. "There has been an incident," the assistant said. "A data breach." Vorath set down his eating utensil. "What kind of breach?" "The sealed records of the Morrison trial. They have appeared on public information networks across the sector. All of them, including the classified sections." Vorath stood up so quickly that his chair fell over behind him. "That is impossible. Those records are stored in the most secure servers on the station." "Apparently not secure enough," his assistant said. "The information is spreading. News services are picking it up. There are questions being asked." Vorath's scales darkened with anger. This was an annoyance, nothing more. He would find whoever was responsible and make an example of them. In the meantime, damage control was needed. "Issue a statement," he said. "Claim the records are forgeries. Say the humans are trying to manipulate public opinion. It may not be that simple. The records include verification codes that prove they are authentic. Anyone can check them." For the first time, Vorath felt a small chill of worry. Find out how this happened. Find out who is responsible, and increase security around the prisoner. If this is a rescue attempt, I want it stopped before it begins. But it was not a rescue attempt. It was something much worse. Over the next 12 hours, more information appeared on public networks across Council space. Financial records showing how Vorath had embezzled funds meant for refugee relief. Communication logs proving that 3 border conflicts had been deliberately started to justify military spending. Evidence of secret agreements between the Thessaly and criminal organizations. Each piece of information was carefully verified. Each piece was released through channels that could not be traced. Each piece was chosen to cause maximum damage to Vorath and his allies while avoiding harm to innocent beings. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the chaos unfold from her command center. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Council officials were scrambling to respond. News services were demanding answers. Public opinion was shifting. Phase 1 is complete, Director Hayes said. The Council is distracted. They are too busy defending themselves to focus on Morrison. It is not enough, Chen said. Vorath is stubborn. He will go through with the execution anyway, if only to prove he cannot be intimidated. We need to escalate. Phase 2? Chen nodded. Show them what we can really do. The message was sent to the Forge. Commander Park received it and began the next stage of the operation. Across Council space, systems began to experience problems. Small problems at first. A communication relay that lost signal for a few seconds. A navigation beacon that gave incorrect readings. A banking system that processed transactions slowly. These glitches were not random. They were carefully targeted, designed to disrupt without destroying, to inconvenience without causing harm. They were a demonstration of capability, a warning of what could come. In the Council chambers, emergency meetings were called. Technical experts were brought in to analyze the problems. They found nothing. The glitches seemed to come from nowhere and disappeared before they could be traced. It is the humans, Vorath declared. They are attacking our infrastructure. We have no proof of that, said Arbiter Senna of the Veldori, a species of tall, blue-skinned beings who had long been rivals of the Thessaly. And even if it is true, we should ask ourselves why they are capable of this. How have they gained such access to our systems? That is not the question we should be asking, Vorath said. The question is how we stop them. Perhaps the question is why we provoke them, Senna replied. The human Morrison was convicted on false evidence. Everyone knows this now. Perhaps we should reconsider the sentence. We will not yield to terrorism. Is it terrorism to defend one of their own? What would we do if the situations were reversed? The argument continued for hours. Meanwhile, the glitches grew worse. Transportation systems experienced delays. Power grids flickered. Emergency services received false alarms. No one was hurt. No one died. But the message was clear. Someone had the ability to reach into the heart of Council civilization and cause chaos whenever they wanted. In his cell on Nexus Prime, Morrison received a visitor. It was a small drone, no larger than an insect, that had somehow bypassed every security system in the detention level. It landed on his shoulder and projected a tiny holographic message. The message was from Admiral Chen. It was only 2 words. Still coming. Morrison smiled and leaned back on his bed. He had faith in his people. He had spent 15 years building this network, recruiting these allies, preparing for this moment. The Council thought they held all the power. They were about to learn how wrong they were. On Thessaly Prime, the homeworld of Vorath species, the planetary defense grid went dark. Every satellite, every ground station, every orbital platform simply stopped responding. The grid did not explode or malfunction. It just turned off, as if someone had flipped a switch. A message appeared on every government screen on the planet. It said, "This is a courtesy demonstration. We have restored your systems. We can turn them off again whenever we choose. Consider your next actions carefully." Within minutes, the grid came back online. Everything worked perfectly. There was no damage, no casualties, no evidence of what had happened except the message that still glowed on screens across the planet. Vorath received the news in his chambers on Nexus Prime. For the first time in his long political career, he felt something close to fear. The humans had just shown that they could shut down the defenses of his homeworld whenever they wanted. They could leave the Thessaly helpless before their enemies. And they had done it without violence, without war, without giving the Council any justification for retaliation. He realized with growing horror that John Morrison had been planning this for years. Every diplomatic mission, every trade negotiation, every friendly conversation had been part of a larger strategy. The human had been preparing for exactly this situation. The execution was scheduled for tomorrow. Vorath had to decide whether to proceed or back down. If he proceeded, he would prove his strength but risk further escalation. If he backed down, he would lose face and show weakness to the entire galaxy. He thought about the message. He thought about his defenseless homeworld. He thought about all the secrets that might still be waiting to be exposed. For the first time, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The third day dawned on Nexus Prime. Though dawn was a meaningless concept on a space station, the artificial lights brightened according to their programmed schedule, and beings across the massive structure began their daily routines. But nothing about this day was routine. High Arbiter Vorath had not slept. He had spent the night in emergency meetings with his advisors, trying to find a way forward that did not end in disaster. The options were limited. He could proceed with the execution and risk further attacks on Thesari infrastructure. He could delay the execution and appear weak. Or he could release Morrison entirely and admit that the council had made a mistake. None of these options were acceptable. The other council members are demanding a meeting, his assistant reported. Several of them are questioning whether we should continue. They are cowards, Vorath said. The humans are bluffing. They cannot actually harm us. All they have done is play tricks with our computers. They turned off our planetary defense grid, and then they turned it back on. They proved they can cause inconvenience. That is all. If we surrender to inconvenience, we will never be taken seriously again. Vorath made his decision. The execution would proceed on schedule. He would show the galaxy that the Thesari did not bend to pressure from lesser species. Whatever the humans tried next, he would endure it. But the humans were not finished demonstrating what they could do. At midday, the Council's secure communication network experienced something unprecedented. For exactly 60 seconds, every message sent through the network was visible to everyone else on the network. Private conversations between diplomats became public. Secret negotiations were exposed. Personal communications that were meant for one person were read by thousands. The network returned to normal after 60 seconds, but the damage was done. Trust had been shattered. Allies suddenly knew what their partners really thought of them. Enemies learned secrets they were never meant to know. The council chambers erupted in chaos. Species that had been allies for centuries now looked at each other with suspicion. Old rivalries flared up as hidden insults were revealed. 3 diplomatic delegations announced they were leaving the station immediately. Vorath watched the chaos and felt his control slipping away. The humans were not trying to rescue Morrison through force. They were destroying the council from within, using the council's own secrets as weapons. "Find them," he ordered his security forces. "Find whoever is doing this and stop them." But there was nothing to find. The attacks came from everywhere and nowhere. Every time the council's technical experts traced a signal, they found only dead ends and false trails. The humans had built their network too well. In his cell, Morrison heard the distant sounds of shouting and alarms. He did not know the details of what was happening, but he could guess. Chen and Park were following the plan. They were showing the council that secrets were only valuable when they stayed secret. A guard came to his cell. "Arbiter Vorath wants to see you." Morrison stood and allowed himself to be escorted through the station. The corridors were more crowded than before. Beings of various species hurried past, some arguing, some looking scared. The normal calm of Nexus Prime had been replaced by an atmosphere of crisis. Vorath was waiting in a private meeting room. He had dismissed his guards, which told Morrison that this conversation was meant to be off the record. The Thesari Arbiter looked tired. His scales had lost some of their usual shine. "Tell them to stop," Vorath said. "Tell who to stop what?" Morrison asked. "Do not play games with me, human. Your people are attacking our systems, our communications, our very way of life. Tell them to stop, and I will consider reducing your sentence." "Reducing it to what? Life in prison instead of death? Exile instead of execution?" Morrison shook his head. "You still do not understand what is happening." "Explain it to me then." Morrison sat down in one of the chairs, even though he had not been invited to sit. Vorath's eye twitched at the disrespect, but he said nothing. "You think this is about me," Morrison said. "It is not. I am just the trigger. What is happening now has been building for a long time. The Council has maintained power through fear and secrets. You have crushed species who dared to challenge you. You have rigged trade agreements to favor your allies. You have lied and cheated and stolen your way to dominance. And you have done it all while claiming to be the righteous protectors of galactic civilization. We have maintained peace for 300 years. You have maintained your peace, your order, your control. But peace built on oppression is not peace. It is just a longer war. Morrison leaned forward. The humans are new to this galaxy. We looked at the Council and we saw what you really are. We saw the corruption and the cruelty and the endless hunger for power, and we decided that someday someone would need to stand against you. So you built a weapon. We built a mirror. Everything that is being exposed right now is true. Every secret that is being revealed is something the Council actually did. We are not creating lies about you. We are simply letting the galaxy see the truth. Vorath's scales darkened with anger. You are destroying the stability of galactic civilization. No, you destroyed it years ago. We are just showing everyone the cracks. The meeting ended without agreement. Vorath returned to the Council chambers, where the situation had grown even worse. 2 more species had announced their withdrawal from the trial proceedings. The Veldori were calling for a complete review of all Council decisions from the past decade. The financial markets were in chaos as investors lost confidence in Council stability. And still, the execution was scheduled for tonight. Admiral Chen received reports of Vorath's stubbornness and knew that stronger measures were needed. She contacted the Forge and authorized the next phase of the operation. Are you sure? Commander Park asked. This will change everything. That is the point, Chen said. Morrison always believed that real change required real consequences. We have shown the Council that we can embarrass them. Now we show them that we can end them. The message went out to hidden assets across the galaxy. Not to human agents, but to others. To species that had suffered under Council rule for generations. To governments that had been forced to accept unfair treaties. To resistance movements that had been crushed but never destroyed. The message was simple. The time is now. We stand with you. On Nexus Prime, something remarkable began to happen. Representatives from 6 different species requested emergency meetings with the Council. These were not the powerful species who sat in the 12 great seats. These were the smaller nations, the conquered peoples, the forgotten worlds that existed on the edges of Council space. They had all received the same information from human sources. They had all been given evidence of how the Council had wronged them. And they had all decided independently but simultaneously that they were no longer willing to be silent. We demand that the charges against John Morrison be reviewed, announced Ambassador Kira of the Talani, a species whose homeworld had been stripped of resources by Council-approved mining operations. We demand that our own grievances be heard. We demand representation on the Council itself. You demand? Vorath asked, his voice dangerous. You are in no position to demand anything. Perhaps not alone, but we are not alone anymore. One by one, the representatives of 23 different species stood in the Council chambers and added their voices to the demand. Some were angry, some were scared, but all of them were tired of being ignored. Vorath looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow arbiters. Some looked worried, some looked thoughtful, a few even looked sympathetic to the smaller species. The Council was fracturing. The humans had not fired a single shot, had not killed a single being, but they had done something far more devastating. They had given hope to the hopeless. They had shown the galaxy that the Council could be challenged. In his cell, Morrison received another visitor. This time it was a full-size holographic projection of Admiral Chen herself. The guards could not see it, thanks to the same technology that had delivered the earlier messages. It is working, Chen said. The Council is divided. Several species are calling for your release. Vorath is losing support by the hour. But he will still try to kill me, Morrison said. His pride will not allow anything else. We know. That is why we are coming to get you. You cannot attack Nexus Prime. The defenses are too strong. Chen smiled. Who said anything about attacking? She explained the plan. Morrison listened carefully, asking questions, offering suggestions. When she finished, he nodded slowly. It could work, he said, but there is a risk. If Vorath panics, He might order my execution immediately instead of waiting for the scheduled time. That is why we have someone watching him. If he tries to move up the schedule, we will know, and we will act." The hologram faded. Morrison was alone again in his cell. Outside, he could hear the sounds of a station in crisis, alarms and announcements, and the footsteps of beings running to deal with one emergency after another. Tomorrow, one way or another, everything would be decided. Either he would walk free and the galaxy would change forever, or he would die and become a martyr for a cause that was bigger than any one person. Either way, the Galactic Council would never be the same. He lay down on his bed and closed his eyes. Sleep did not come easily, but eventually exhaustion won. His last thought before darkness took him was of Earth, of blue skies and green fields, of the home he might never see again. But if his sacrifice could help create a better galaxy for those who came after, then it would be worth it. That was what he had believed for 15 years. That was what he believed now. The final day was coming. The final day arrived with the weight of history pressing down on Nexus Prime. Throughout the station, beings who had come from across the galaxy waited to see what would happen. The execution was scheduled for sunset, which on the station meant the moment when the artificial lights would dim to simulate evening. Until then, the Council would meet one last time to confirm the sentence. Outside Nexus Prime, something appeared in space that had never been seen before. A single ship emerged from faster-than-light travel and stopped at the edge of sensor range. It was small compared to the massive warships that protected the station. Its hull was painted white, and it carried no visible weapons. On its side, in letters that could be read from orbit, was its name, Olive Branch. The Council's defense fleet immediately went to alert status. Weapons powered up, shields activated. Communication channels crackled with demands for identification. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Olive Branch and transmitted her response on an open frequency that everyone could hear. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. I am here as an envoy of the United Earth Government. I request permission to address the Galactic Council regarding the case of John Morrison." The request was technically proper under Council law. Any government could send representatives to speak at Council proceedings, even in criminal cases. The Council could refuse, but doing so would be seen as hiding something. After a long pause, permission was granted. The Olive Branch was escorted to a docking bay by 4 armed cruisers. Chen noted with professional interest that the cruisers never let her ship out of their weapons range. They were taking no chances. She disembarked alone, wearing the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. Her white hair was pulled back neatly, and her expression was calm. Guards surrounded her immediately and escorted her through the station toward the Council chamber. On the way, she passed through crowds of beings who had gathered to witness history. Some shouted insults at her. Some cheered. Most simply watched in silence, curious to see what the humans would do next. High Arbiter Vorath was waiting in the Council chamber. He had dressed in his full ceremonial robes, decorated with symbols of Thessari power and authority. He intended to project strength. He intended to show the galaxy that the Council could not be intimidated. "Admiral Chen," he said as she entered, "you come to plead for the life of a convicted criminal?" "I come to offer the Council an opportunity," Chen replied. She walked to the center of the chamber and stood in the same spot where Morrison had stood 3 days ago. "An opportunity to end this crisis peacefully." "There is no crisis," Vorath said. "There is only a human spy who has been convicted of crimes against the Council. His execution will proceed as scheduled." "I think you know that is not true." Chen looked around the chamber at the other arbiters. Several of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Over the past 3 days, certain information has become public. Information about corruption and abuse of power. Information about how the Council really operates. This information has caused considerable difficulty for your government. Stolen information, illegally obtained. It proves nothing. It proves everything. And there is more, much more. We have files on every species in this chamber. Every scandal that was buried, every crime that was covered up, every secret that was supposed to stay hidden forever. Chen paused to let her words sink in. "We do not want to release this information. We are not your enemies, but we will protect our people. You threaten us? I offer you a choice. Release John Morrison, issue a formal apology, Agree to reform the Council's trial procedures to prevent this kind of injustice from happening again. In exchange, we will return all the information we have gathered. We will restore all the systems we have accessed. We will forget this ever happened. Vorath stood up from his seat. His scales had turned almost black with rage. You come into our chamber and dictate terms to us? You are a minor species. You have no fleet capable of challenging our power. You have no standing to make demands. You are correct, Chen said. We cannot defeat you in battle. We have no desire to try, but we can make you irrelevant. Look around this chamber, Arbiter. How many of your allies are still with you? Vorath looked. What he saw clearly disturbed him. Several seats were empty, their occupants having withdrawn from the proceedings in protest. Others contained arbiters who would not meet his eyes. The coalition that had kept the Thessari in power for 3 centuries was crumbling. The smaller species are organizing, Chen continued. 23 governments have already demanded reform. More are joining every hour. They are not doing this because we told them to. They are doing it because they finally believe change is possible. You can crush them one by one, as you have always done, but you cannot crush them all at once, and you cannot stop the information from spreading. What do you want? The question came not from Vorath, but from Arbiter Senna of the Veldori. The blue-skinned alien looked tired but thoughtful. What do humans really want from this? Chen turned to face her. We want what we have always wanted. A galaxy where all species are treated fairly, where strength does not automatically mean the right to oppress, where the law serves everyone, not just the powerful. We are not asking to rule. We are asking for justice. Pretty words, Vorath said, but words do not change reality. The Council has kept peace for 300 years. Without us, there would be chaos. There is already chaos, Senna said, and perhaps we have earned it. Perhaps a little chaos is the price of the peace we built on the suffering of others. The chamber erupted in argument. Species that had been allies shouted at each other. Old grievances surfaced. The carefully maintained order of the Council began to break apart. In the middle of the noise, a door opened. Guards entered, escorting a prisoner in energy cuffs. John Morrison walked into the Council chamber for the second time in 3 days. He looked thinner than before, but his eyes were alert and his steps were steady. He had heard the arguments from his cell. He knew that the moment of decision had arrived. Vorath raised his hand for silence. The chamber slowly quieted. Enough, the High Arbiter said. We will settle this now. John Morrison has been sentenced to death. The sentence will be carried out immediately. He gestured to the guards. They moved forward, reaching for Morrison, and then they stopped. Every Thessari in the chamber suddenly found that they could not move. Their muscles had locked in place. They could breathe, they could blink, but they could not take a single step. It was as if invisible hands had grabbed them and held them motionless. What is this? Vorath demanded. Only his mouth seemed capable of movement. Chen held up a small device, a targeted neural disruption field. It affects only Thessari physiology, completely harmless, completely temporary, but very effective. This is an act of war. No, this is an act of prevention. We will not allow you to murder an innocent man while we are trying to negotiate peace. Chen walked over to Morrison and unlocked his cuffs. We could have done this from the beginning. We could have walked in here, frozen your guards, and taken Morrison home. We chose not to. We chose to give you a chance to do the right thing. She looked at the other arbiters, the ones who could still move. We chose to show you that humanity does not want war. We do not want conquest. We do not want revenge. We want to be part of a galaxy that is fair and just. We want to help build something better than what exists now. Morrison rubbed his wrists where the cuffs had been. He looked at Vorath, frozen in his ceremonial robes, helpless despite all his power. You still have a choice, Morrison said. You can let us walk out of here. You can agree to the reforms that your own people are demanding. You can be part of the change that is coming, or you can refuse. You can declare war on humanity. You can try to maintain your grip on power through force. And if we refuse, Vorath asked through clenched teeth, then we release everything, every secret, every crime, every lie. The coalition you have built will collapse within days. Your own people will turn against you. You will lose everything, not because we destroyed it, but because you built it on a foundation of deception that could not survive the truth." The chamber was silent. Everyone was waiting. The future of the galaxy hung on what happened in the next few moments. Finally, Senna spoke. "I call for a vote on the question of releasing John Morrison and establishing a committee to review council trial procedures." "You cannot call a vote while we are prisoners in our own chamber," Voreth said. "Watch me." Senna stood up. "All in favor?" One by one, hands rose around the chamber. First the Veldori, then the Consortium of Artists, then the merchant princes of Keelan, then others, species who had grown tired of Thessari dominance, who had been waiting for a moment like this for generations. When the count was finished, 7 of the 12 council species had voted in favor. A clear majority. Chen deactivated the neural field. The Thessari could move again. Voreth stumbled, nearly fell, caught himself on the arm of his chair. "The motion carries," Senna announced. "John Morrison is released. A reform committee will be established, and the council will begin the process of addressing the grievances of our member and associate species." Voreth looked around the chamber at the faces of those who had voted against him. He saw the end of an era, the end of Thessari dominance, the end of the order he had devoted his life to maintaining. "This is not over," he said. "No," Morrison agreed. "It is just beginning, but it does not have to be war. It can be progress. It can be growth. It can be the birth of something better." He extended his hand toward Voreth. "The choice is still yours." Voreth looked at the hand. For a long moment, no one knew what he would do. Then slowly he turned and walked out of the chamber without saying another word. It was not acceptance, but it was not war either. And for now, that was enough. 6 months had passed since the day the Galactic Council voted to release John Morrison. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways that few could have predicted. The Reform Committee had worked faster than anyone expected. Old laws were reviewed and revised. Trade agreements were renegotiated to be fairer to smaller species. The trial system was completely rebuilt, with new protections for the accused and oversight to prevent political interference. It was not perfect, but it was better than what had come before. The Thessari had withdrawn from active participation in the council. Voreth had resigned as High Arbiter, replaced by a younger leader who was more willing to adapt to the new reality. Their species was still powerful, still influential, but they were no longer the undisputed masters of galactic politics. Humanity had taken a seat on the council. Not one of the 12 great seats, not yet, but a position of honor as a special advisor. Admiral Chen had been offered the role, but she had declined. She said she was a soldier, not a politician. The job of building humanity's future in the galaxy should belong to someone who had dedicated their life to that mission. And so John Morrison became the first human to hold a permanent position in the Galactic Council. He stood now at a window in his new office on Nexus Prime, looking out at the stars. The office was small by council standards, just a single room with simple furniture and a view of space. Morrison had refused anything larger. He said he worked better without distractions. A chime sounded. He turned to see Commander Lisa Park entering the room. She had left the Forge after the crisis ended, accepting a position in Earth's official diplomatic service. Her skills with information systems were now being used to build connections rather than exploit weaknesses. "The delegation from the Talani Confederation is here," she said. "They want to discuss the new trade proposals." "Give me 5 minutes." Park nodded and left. Morrison turned back to the window. He thought about the past 15 years. All the planning, all the preparation, all the careful work that had led to this moment. He had spent so long building a weapon that he had almost forgotten what it was for. The network of secrets and access points that had brought the council to its knees was still there, still waiting. They had not destroyed it. They had not needed to use most of it. That was the point. The goal had never been to hurt anyone. The goal had been to create a situation where hurting people was not necessary, to show that strength without violence was possible, to prove that the right information, used at the right time, could change the world without firing a shot. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Admiral Chen entered without waiting for permission. She was wearing civilian clothes now, having officially retired from military service. But she still moved like a soldier, and her eyes still missed nothing. You look tired, she said. I am tired. Changing a galaxy is harder than threatening one. Chen smiled. That was always going to be true. Building is harder than destroying, but you knew that when you started. I did. Morrison gestured to a chair. Sit. Talk to me. You did not come all this way just to check on my health. Chen sat. I came to say goodbye. I am going home. Back to Earth. I want to see real sky again. Breathe real air. Remember what we were fighting for. You earned it. So did you. You could come with me. Let someone else carry the burden for a while. Morrison shook his head. Not yet. There is still too much to do. The reforms are fragile. The Thessary are watching for any sign of weakness. If I leave now, everything we built could fall apart. You cannot hold the galaxy together by yourself. No, but I can help. I can be here when it matters. I can make sure the promises we made are kept. He looked at her. That is what this was always about. Not power, not revenge. Just keeping promises. Chen nodded. She understood. They had talked about this many times over the years, late nights on ships and stations, planning for a future that might never come. Now that future was here, and it was messy and complicated and full of problems they had not anticipated. But it was also full of hope. The forge is being converted, she said. We are turning it into a research station. No more spy ships, no more hidden weapons, just scientists and explorers looking for new worlds and new possibilities. That is good. That is what it should be. Some of the team are staying on. They want to help with the transition. Others are going back to regular service. Chen paused. Captain Webb asked me to give you a message. He said that he is proud to have served with you. He said that you were right all those years ago. When you told him that patience was the greatest weapon, Morrison felt something warm in his chest. He had not seen Webb since the crisis ended. The captain had returned to patrol duty, refusing any promotions or recognition. He said he was not a hero. He was just a soldier who followed orders. Tell him thank you, Morrison said. Tell him that none of this would have been possible without people like him. People who believed when belief was hard. People who worked and waited and trusted that someday it would all be worth it. Chen stood. I will tell him, and I will tell Earth that their representative is doing well, that he is making them proud. I hope so. They embraced briefly. Two old friends saying farewell at the end of a long journey. Then Chen was gone, walking out of the office and out of Morrison's daily life. They would stay in touch, of course, but things would be different now. The war was over. The time for building had begun. Morrison returned to his window. Outside, ships moved through space. Cargo vessels and passenger liners and diplomatic transports. 1,000 different species going about their lives, most of them unaware of how close everything had come to falling apart. He remembered something his father had told him long ago, back on Earth, before he ever dreamed of traveling to the stars. His father had been a history teacher. He had said that the most important moments in history were often the quietest. The treaties that ended wars, the laws that protected the weak, the choices that led to peace instead of conflict. Anyone can destroy, his father had said. It takes real strength to build. Morrison had spent his life trying to live up to those words. He had built networks and alliances and careful plans. He had built relationships with species that humanity had never met before. He had built a foundation for a better future, and now finally he was seeing the results. There was a knock at the door. The Telani delegation was waiting. They wanted to discuss trade and cooperation, and the 1,000 small details that would determine whether the new era would succeed or fail. Morrison straightened his suit and prepared to get back to work. Far away on a small world in a system that most maps did not include, a memorial had been built. It was a simple structure, just a wall of stone with names carved into its surface. The names belonged to people who had suffered under the old council. People who had been oppressed and forgotten and told that their lives did not matter. Children came to this memorial on school trips. They learned about the Quiet War, as it had come to be called. They learned about how humans had won without fighting, how they had used truth instead of weapons, how they had shown the galaxy that there was another way. One day an old man visited the memorial. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane, reading the names on the wall. A child from one of the school groups approached him. "Are you someone important?" the child asked. The old man smiled. "No, just someone who was there when things changed. My teacher says humans are the strongest species in the galaxy. Is that true?" The old man thought about the question. He thought about Admiral Chen and Captain Webb and Commander Park. He thought about the thousands of people who had worked in secret for 15 years. He thought about the species who had risen up to demand justice when they finally believed justice was possible. "No," he said, "humans are not the strongest, but we might be the most stubborn. When we see something wrong, we cannot just accept it. We have to try to make it right, even when it takes years, even when everyone tells us it is impossible." "Is that why you won?" "We did not win. Nobody won. That was the whole point." The old man looked at the names on the wall. "We found a way for everyone to move forward together. That is not victory. That is just the beginning of something new." The child nodded, not entirely understanding, but sensing that the old man's words were important. Then her teacher called her back to the group, and she ran off to rejoin her classmates. The old man stayed a while longer, reading names and remembering faces. Then he turned and walked away. Above him, the stars shone bright and cold and full of possibilities. A new chapter of galactic history was being written, and humanity was part of it. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, just as one more species trying to make things a little bit better than they were before. That was enough. That had always been enough. And somewhere on Nexus Prime, John Morrison finished his meeting with the Talani delegation and moved on to the next task on his list. There was always more work to do. There were always more problems to solve. There were always more promises to keep. But that was all right. Building was harder than destroying, and it was worth every moment of effort. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in 300 years, it was changing for the better.